Well, hello there everyone! When it comes to video game bosses, there are 3 to 5 bosses that really need to stand out in a game depending on what they're going for. The first boss, as it's your first real test to see what you've learned in the game so far. The final boss, acting as the culmination of everything you've learned, and one big intense finale or a satisfying narrative conclusion. Then you have things like the super boss, which is the optional true challenge designed for those that have mastered the game. You have maybe your choke point boss, which is much harder than the bosses beforehand, and also acting as a barrier to reach the rest of the game, usually around halfway through, and sometimes the penultimate boss, which can act as a way to build up to the final battle of the game, usually either hyping you up for the fight with the big bad, or maybe it's against the big bad themselves. But there's one boss that no one talks about because no one really cares, and to be honest, this video was originally going to just be like a 5-minute long joke, but then I kept digging deeper and deeper, and now I've got 20 entries. So, time for top 20-second bosses. With the tutorial done, and the player having proven they've learned the basics, the next question that comes up is, now what? And the answer to that is you play through some more levels or dungeons before you get to the next guy. While they often lack the flash or spectacle to be found in the first boss, they can have more mechanical depth as the training wheels are almost always gone by the time you reach this point in the game. Though that's enough rambling, so let's get started with what I consider to be the top 20 best second bosses in gaming. And why top 20? Because I lack restraint. Number 20, The Pursuer, Dark Souls 2. Kicking it off, we're pulling the Soulsborne trigger already with everyone's favorite edgelord. The Pursuer, true to his name, is a foe that can appear multiple times throughout your journey through Drangleic, and despite the many weapons he carries, the only one he uses is his greatsword, as the other weapons are likely those of his victims. Overall, the fight is fairly simple, as all he really is going to do is fight you and use his sword slashes, thrusts, and maybe some shield bashes, but that's all you really need. Due to the nature of appearing in multiple places, the arena can change significantly, and technically he can be fought even before the last giant, but you only get one shot at taking him out then. However, he counts as the second boss, as this encounter after the last giant is where he gets his cutscene, as well as his boss theme, making his first required appearance in the game, and the only time you actually have to fight him. And he also has boss music play here, which, while fairly simple, it's still a well-made fight that gets the player used to more 1v1 knight-style bosses, as well as rewarding those that have learned to parry, giving the fight a higher skill ceiling while not being so oppressive that parries are mandatory like, say, Gwyn from Dark Souls 1. And if you make use of the environment, you can even use the ballista to destroy him and absolutely annihilate this boss fight. It's a fun boss, it's good overall, and I think it does exactly what it needs to. And number 19, Flagra, Metroid Prime. Next up on our list, we have the Giant Angry Plant, and I'm going to argue that Flagra is the second boss, as it's the second foe in the game to have a health bar, while things like Incinerator Drone were just mini-bosses. I don't think anyone's going to care that I'm skipping Incinerator Drone. Flagra is basically immune to all weapons, but you can stun it. However, being such a giant plant, it requires a bunch of water and sunlight to stay alive, so it's going to be using the solar reflectors in order to maximize the amount of sunlight it receives. Ultimately, this means that you have yourself a puzzle boss where you have to shoot the reflectors, then bomb parts of the generator to burn up the plant. But hey, it's cool because with the Wii version, or the Switch remaster, you have much more precise aiming options than the GameCube original, so instead of having to run full circuits around the arena while listening to a broken 10-second loop of a song, you can instead go for some long-range crack shots to quickly shut down Flagra with a good fully looping boss theme, making for an easy boss, but one that I think is fun to fight and especially fun to try and speedrun. Number 18, Slyth, EX Zodiac. EX Zodiac is a game where fans said if Nintendo isn't going to make a new Star Fox game, we'll do it ourselves. And the second boss of the game is against Slyth, who for some reason uses a giant serpent mech while being a serpent himself. Live your dreams, I guess. Slyth is split into 2 distinct phases, where in his first phase, he's going to alternate between firing missiles directly at you and firing them into the ground to create some flaming pillars, so you'll be bobbing and weaving through the various attacks he throws at you, and while simple, it is early into the game, so simplicity is, in my opinion, a good thing. Then, when he gets low on HP, he's going to enter his second phase where he starts charging up a powerful laser, and you need to blast him in order to take him out. It becomes a bit of a burn phase. However, unless you have a fully upgraded laser and you have way too many bombs, you likely won't be able to kill him in time, so you're going to have to dodge his big attack at least once. Overall, I think it makes for a fast-paced and thrilling boss fight that can be a little bit challenging as well. Number 17, King Caliente from Mario Galaxy 1. Compared to most fights on this list, King Caliente is one of the simplest and also easiest fights here, as all he's really going to do is fire off projectiles for you to play tennis against him with. And in his last hit, he'll summon out some Potaboos to make the field a bit more dangerous, but I think this is still a solid evolution over the Dino Piranha fight, as you'll have to move around the arena to avoid his attacks, as the area denial will increase over time, especially when his health starts to get low. And he'll start summoning the Potaboos, making the area all the more dangerous. And as he loses health, he also gets better at deflecting the coconuts back, so it becomes a little bit more, I guess you could say, intense. It's still a very low stakes fight, but it's one I enjoy, and I mean, hey, it's Mario Galaxy, one of my favorite games of all time, and I think it's aged fantastically. Number 16, Yolvan, Ender Magnolia, Bloom in the Mist. From a Mario game to a dark fantasy Metroidvania, we have Yolvan the Black-Winged Huntsman. This is another two-phase boss fight, with phase 1 being his humanoid form where he'll fly through the air, firing down on you with his guns. You'd think this would be kind of annoying, but thankfully there's plenty of time to retaliate against him, and you can tell what attack he's going to do by the sound his guns make right before they fire. It's a neat way of telegraphing what attack is coming out, but I don't think most handguns have a charge shot, if I'm being realistic here. Then, when he runs out of health, you're not done, as he's instead gonna go to phase 2 where he transforms into this nightmare creature, all while the boss music gets going, and you're fighting a far more aggressive foe than anything you've seen up to this point. But it doesn't get annoying because this game doesn't have contact damage, thank God! And overall, it's a fast and frantic fight that's exciting, and I think a good boss more than earning a spot on this list. I'm also very looking forward to seeing where this game goes because the early access of it was a lot of fun to play through, and a major improvement over Ender Lilies, which I already liked a fair bit as is. Number 15, Yaoguai King Ling Shugi. Shuzi. Whatever. Black Myth Wukong. Now for the giant wolf weasel thing. This guy is your first major beast boss of the game after some scripted fights like Erlong and non-bosses like Bolgard. It's nice to have a proper honest-to-goodness boss fight against a cool opponent. His attacks are what you'd expect with swipes, bites, and lunges, but the way he moves around the arena as well as the way he fights and ends up looking, I think it's a cool boss and honestly does a good job testing to see how well you've learned the early game combat, which you're probably decently well at if you spent an hour bashing your head against the Wandering Wight like I did. Oh, and if I pronounce his name wrong, be sure to let me know in the comments. I'll make sure I get it even worse next time. Number 14, Dual Kirkal, Blaster Master 03. Didn't I already talk about this game last time I did one of these videos? No, that was the prequel? Well, okay then. Dual Kirkal shows how the bosses have become increasingly more involved, to the point that you're no longer going to be able to spam Wave Blaster to kill the enemy easily, and now, instead of just one or two attacks, you got this guy covering the ground in hazards, firing off electricity at you, and charging right at you for melee attacks, requiring Jason to make use of his counterattacks if he wants to stand a decent chance in battle, and bosses now have at least 2 health bars if they so desire. Of course, it's a thrilling fight and it can be tough, but the on-foot portion is only a part of the battle. Once Kirkal runs out of health, he doesn't die, instead he flees into subspace where you have to follow him, and now the fight becomes a tank battle. This phase is short but frantic, and it's enough to keep you engaged and does a good job introducing players to bosses that'll make use of both gameplay styles for combat, though I admittedly wish that more bosses in this game actually did this, because to my knowledge only actually 4 bosses in the entire game have you swapping between both combat styles to make use of it, not even the true final boss, which is a little bit disappointing. But still, that's not a problem on Kirkal's part. and overall I think he does a fantastic job showing just how crazy this game is going to get. Number 13, The Golden Dragon. Asp Libra Revision. Okay, this is probably the simplest fight on here, as all the Golden Dragon's really going to do is either breathe fireballs, or claw swipe, or breathe a lot of fireballs. And this game has a simpler combat system than most. But it gets the fun gameplay loop down of attacking enemies to build up your spell uses, at which point you have things like Salamander, and this boss only takes physical damage on the head, so you can't just attack him wildly. But you can still build up your gauge if you attack the body, and that will allow you to summon out Salamander, which will do damage to the entire body, which can bring you into stunning the boss. There's a lot of extra little things going on here, and it's fun. I can't really say that this fight is mechanically anything super crazy, but it works really well, and once you beat the boss, you gain access to the Scales of Libra, which kickstarts the game's main story because of how big the plot points are. On top of that, I have to mention the music that plays in this fight is really freaking good. Though I'm not going to have a time where we stop and listen because, well, you'll be seeing this game again in the future. And after you beat the boss, you actually obtain the Scales of Libra, which are the plot point item of the game. And when you exit the village to see what you've gotten for, well, obtaining the scales, when you leave the caves, you get outside and you'll get to see the village is destroyed. But not recently. This happened a long time ago. This is the part that got me intrigued enough to get the game, and I wanted to see where it was going after the demo was completed. And I can highly recommend giving this game a try because it's got a demo that goes up to this point, and I think overall, it's a good time. The game is well worth it, and it's a lot of fun. I can recommend it. Number 12, Fortitudo, Bayonetta 1. And now it's time for the Platinum Games entry of the video. Fortitudo has a cool design, and it hits all the right points for a flashy and fun boss using a ton of powerful attacks, such as breathing fire on you, biting at you with his dragon heads, and nuking the arena, requiring you to use time reversal in order to repair it and get some significantly better vantages, while also having some goofy but still cool quick-time events that you can perform to deal significant damage. But what really sells the fight for me is when you get him down to his final health bar. In the final phase, the entire arena itself will be surrounded in witch time, as everything is currently catching fire and about to collapse, so you have to take him out before he kills you or time runs out. Luckily though, time's probably not going to run out, but it adds a cool sense of urgency to the battle, and the frantic music can make things really intense. Overall, it's a good boss and I like it a lot. Though I do wish Bayonetta was a better game series as a whole, because, let's be honest, the third game is kind of a mess. Number 11, Elverit, Final Fantasy VIII. Hey look, a turn-based RPG. Wait, wrong video. Final Fantasy VIII sure is one of the games of all time, but its music slaps pretty hard, and the bosses are quite fun with the mechanic of keeping up with your level, at least to some extent. This fight comes in 3 separate phases, where you're first going to be fighting off Biggs, then Wedge shows up to help him, then after a while they both get blown away, and Elverit, as the real boss, shows up to make your life, well, a challenge. Now, as for what really makes Elverit stand out, well, the boss is a little bit special because this is the first place you can get your hand on double, allowing you to multicast spells if you so desire, but Elverit makes use of powerful wind and thunder magic, so you'll want to make use of ice and fire to counter it, as well as making use of the recently acquired blind spell that can reduce the boss's accuracy, making things much more manageable, and hey, I always love when a boss actually is weak to status effects in an RPG. The fight can be challenging, especially if he scales to the high end of his stats, so your health is likely to get lower, which in turn means you're more likely to make use of your limit breaks for the first time. Selfies is fun and chaotic. Squall, aka Leon, and Zell, on the other hand, have limits involving button commands keeping you, well, they keep things more exciting and just click instead of just clicking through moves. In Leon/Squall's case, it's a little timing minigame. Meanwhile, with Zell, you do some button inputs like it's a fighting game. Overall, while FF8 isn't without its problems, oh lord does it have problems, I think it handles the boss fights pretty darn well. Number 10, Mantisant, Visions of Mana. This might be the most recent game on the list now that I think about it. Visions of Mana is a ton of fun, and while the Mantis Ant has appeared multiple times throughout the series, this is his debut in a proper 3D game. No, the Secret of Mana remake does not count, that game is trash. The boss has some strong wide sweeping attacks to keep you on your toes, and a weak point on his rear, so you need to embrace your inner Soulsborne player and smack the booty. And the boss is the first time you'll really get to swap between Val and Karina to get things done, and you'll also just get to see how multi-party member combat can be a fair bit of fun, instead of just playing as Val and stomping everything, or having a boss with no relation to the main cast whatsoever. The boss makes for, in my opinion, a fairly good early game challenge, and at the end of the first dungeon, I think it overall succeeds and cemented in my mind that this would be a really good game, and it's honestly a shame that the dev team basically got shut down almost immediately after the game was released. Seriously, Square, what the hell are you guys doing? Number 9, the Dragon Tank, Chrono Trigger. When I think of iconic video game bosses, this one sometimes comes to mind, if only because I've played Chrono Trigger so dang much. This boss takes place on a bridge after a big prison break segment of the game, and is the only boss to use the side-scrolling perspective, which is kind of a shame because it looks really cool, but at the same time I guess that makes the fight more special. This boss also has some mechanical depth as he's split into 3 separate parts of the body. Well, you've got your body, you've got your wheels, and you've got the head. Technically, you only actually need to bring down the body in order to win, but the best way to go about this fight is by taking out the wheels and head to both significantly cut down on the boss's attacks, and also to reduce his healing, because otherwise that head will probably end up out healing your damage over time. On top of that, each part has a different elemental resistance in order to stop you from just spamming your strongest techniques, so you need to actually make use of things like Cyclone to get some decent damage off. And I think overall, the boss has a high enough damage output to provide you a solid challenge without going into the realm of being too hard, which is good. I think that the Dragon Tank is a fantastic second boss, and is one of the pieces of proof I would point to for showing that turn-based boss fights can be fun and dynamic, and Chrono Trigger has been kicking ass for almost 30 years. Seriously, play this game if you haven't. It's the easiest recommendation I think I can give anyone for a video game. Even more so than my absolute favorite video game. Number 8, the Daedal Sword, Phantasy Star Online 2, New Genesis. You know, despite my username being Daedal, it's crazy how it's taken me over a year to make a video talking about Phantasy Star in any way, shape, or form. I should probably fix that. The Daedal Sword is, in my opinion, a good boss, being a large and imposing foe that has a bunch of different sword and beam strikes that look really cool, and a visual design that is awesome, with a very clear distinction between the first and second phase of the boss fight. And hey, there's multiple paths to victory depending on the player and what kind of combat system you decide you want to go with. Melee focus classes can jump over his various sword swipes to get easy shots at breaking his armor and exposing his core. Gunners can take use of his cooldown periods in order to shred his health with sharp shots, and magic focus classes can abuse his elemental weakness to ice in order to proc freeze, leaving him vulnerable to punishment for a very long period of time. Though there is one big shortcoming with this boss, and that's that he's sadly a victim of power creep, as even when starting a new file, all of the early game boosts provided to a player nowadays will make it so you'll seriously outlevel him and basically have no trouble in a game where 5 levels can make a world of difference. Number 7, Chaklock, Halo Infinite. Welcome to my Bitcoin farm, Spartan. It's where you will be broken. Anyways, good old Halo Infinite. Halo Infinite. So much promise for a bright future, only to be completely shit-canned. Well, regardless, I still enjoyed Infinite's campaign a fair amount despite its flaws, and never really felt the same issues with its open world that a lot of people did, if only because I don't play games like Far Cry or any Ubisoft games. I recommend it, you'll be a much happier person that way. Crazy to think that companies only now at risk of going out of business, but either way, Shacklock is a pretty cool boss fight where he's going to go into stealth mode most of the time, so you need to make use of your newly obtained sonar pulse to try and find him, and then you can use your weapons and the electric coils around the arena to try and, well, hurt him. I like that it's got you swapping between both your sonar pulse and your grappling hook to get good use in this fight. And Shacklock's got two different weapons. He's got his little blaster, which doesn't do too much damage, but it can take your shield down. Then he's got his energy sword, which anyone who's played Halo knows to fear the energy sword, because those things will kill you very quickly. Overall, it's a good boss. I think it's pretty fun, and it's just kind of a shame that Halo Infinite's, well, it's a shame the story basically gets shit-canned completely, because so much for that expansion they promised. Number 6, Braum and Hertz, Radiant Historia, Perfect Chronology. This game is fantastic, and you should totally play it. Comfortably in my top 10 favorite video games. Anyways, gushing aside, after the start of the game, where you get your shit absolutely rocked by Palamedes, and then we get to Chapter 1, well, it's time for you to fight the Bandit Brothers, and they've got a little bit going on here. Braum is the brute of the group, relying on heavy attacks and just getting in there and doing damage, while Hertz focuses more on buffs and debuffs, as well as having a double attack design for softening up instead of killing. Because there's two targets, the game rewards you for making use of the grid arena, because if you drag them both onto the same spot, then the rest of the party will be able to attack them both at the same time, and it's a good way of getting the player to engage with the main mechanics, while keeping things relatively simple, at least for now. Honestly, a lot of bosses in this game are fun because while they're not as flashy as the likes of Persona, they're all just as well designed, and given that Palamedes was a forced loss battle, I'd say that all the good design started here. Oh, and as a bonus, each of them has a little pinch phase where Hertz will buff his speed, and if he's the last one alive, while Braum buffs his attack to honestly some pretty insane levels. Dude was out here hitting Rainy for 139 damage. This is the second boss. I'm on normal mode. Number 5, Via Valadragel, Ys8 Lacrimosa of Dana. Hey look, it's my favorite game of all time. Well, thankfully I'm allowed to be a bit biased this time around because this boss is really good. Via Valadragel looks like he stepped right out of Monster Hunter, and he's got enough tenacity to make Ridley impressed, as you fight him 4 separate times throughout the course of this game, giving him a unique and cool rivalry with our main cast without there being any words exchanged. It's kinda neat. As for the fight itself, well, he's a large fire-breathing Velociraptor, and because he's fire-breathing, I don't think he falls under the category of Utahraptor. Anyways, he's got his tried and true moves such as the claw swipes, tail swipes, bites, fireballs, and of course, can't forget the hip checks. But there's a bit more here, as the Valadragel has over 10,000 HP, which is quite large compared to the first boss's 900. But not to worry, as he also takes reduced damage on the body, but he takes massively increased damage on the head, so it's there to encourage target prioritization and locking on to certain body parts. It also means that the strategy to this boss is to face him head on instead of just camping behind his ass. Overall, I think it's a great early game boss that does what it needs to in setting up the events to come, and shows just how dangerous this island is, because guys like this roam the land and he's still very much alive after this boss fight ends. Number 4, Wyvern, Sonic Frontiers. Hey look, it's Sonic again. Yeah, for those that have played this game, the fight against Wyvern tends to be a pretty big highlight for many as you fly through the sky over this desert island, but before that can begin, you gotta get to Wyvern's head, so you'll be running on one of the mysterious Starlight Carnival looking tracks. Squid, where's Squid? I just want to talk to him. But this first phase of the fight, well, it makes things a little bit intense, and it's a lot more interesting than just a quick climb up Giganto with no real threats. I think it can be pretty fun. But of course, that's only the first part of the fight, and then you go supersonic and the music kicks in. Once you go supersonic, it's time to fight Wyvern for real, so you fly all around the island picking up rings, dodging mini missiles, and taking chances to just lay into him. Out of all the Titan bosses, this is mechanically one of the simplest, as it's more a spectacle than anything else, but you're still in decent control of the action, so I say enjoy the thrill ride. It's got a decent challenge, good use of QTEs, some amazing music, and one of the most cinematic fights I've seen in any video game. This guy could have been a final boss in most other video games, but, well, he's not even the halfway point here. That's just how insane things get, even if Base Game Supreme does suck eggs. Number 3, Strider. Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon. Do you like spectacle? Do you like scale? Well, here we are with a massive level for a boss, and I love it. This fight does a great job making you feel like a badass early on as you fly through and around and absolutely demolish this colossal monster, flying around it and taking care of the various weak points, just about becoming a sandbox to explore. Now, the Eye at the End isn't anything too crazy, but I do appreciate that the last phase isn't a total freebie, even if it is really easy, because the Eye will still fire out its lasers and fire off some missiles to keep you on your toes. Overall, it's a fantastic boss that I think does a much better job getting you hyped for what's to come than the attack helicopter ever did. So yeah, it's a good boss, I like it a lot, and I think it's one of the best level bosses I've ever gone up against, alongside Perfect Chaos from Sonic Generations. Number 2, the Merc Slayer, Lunar Lux. I really want to do a boss ranking video for this game at some point, because it's excellent, but I'm scared that they'll do another major content update to the post-game as soon as I finish scripting it, just like last time. Either way, there's a lot of story that goes on here, but that's not too important, as you have an honest-to-goodness 1v1 scrap against a character that will eventually become a party member, and if you've seen my other videos, you know I love those sorts of setups. At first, his 1500 HP seems pretty insane given the strongest opponent prior to this only had 700, but the game really wants you to use your newly acquired combo moves to absolutely tear into him, and the game has a healthy amount of inspiration from Mario and Luigi games, meaning you can damage him during some of his attacks. Everything he does has you doing some sort of action to counter it, so you're never simply idling and you're never just twiddling your thumbs. And now that you've gained access to the main hub world, you've obtained some additional build experimentation that you're more than welcome to give a try against this boss, turning it into a playground with some kick-ass music. In fact, you know what? Have a listen. Overall, I'd say Merc Slayer is a phenomenal boss, and Lunar Lux is a phenomenal game that I can't recommend enough. Genuinely, one of the most fun games I have played in a good long while, and if this game actually came out this year, and I didn't just find out about it this year, it probably would have been a Game of the Year contender. Heck, in some ways it still is one, but that's neither here nor there. I think it's more than worthy of taking home the silver medal.
Mighty dragon, thou'rt a true-born heir. Lend me thy strength, O kindred. Deliver me unto greater heights. Well. As a lord, I command thee kneel. I am the lord of all that is golden.
There was only one boss it could have been. The lord of all that is golden, the amazing Godrick the Grafted. Given the super open nature of Elden Ring, you could argue Godrick isn't the second boss of the game, but screw you, I'm gonna do what I want. And the only thing that you actually have to beat before him is Margit, so I'm counting him here. Cool. Godrick has a fantastic theme, fun combos, great attacks,
good atmosphere,
and so much more. The fight is bordering on perfection, and honestly, I think it was a bold choice of From Software to put their 4th best non-DLC boss fight at the start of the game, but seriously, Godrick is awesome. Now, he may be a weak outcast among the gods, writing his 0.01% heritage harder than Elizabeth Warren, but he's got the presence, and that's displayed nowhere better than Phase 2.
Truest of dragons, lend me thy strength.
God, that voice acting is so good. The dragon gives him some cool attacks, but honestly, this fight more so serves to show just how nutty this game is going to get if this is our first demigod and he's considered the weakest link. All his attacks are fun to deal with, do just the right amount of damage, and something I don't think he gets nearly enough credit for is his earthquake attack. It's an absolute pain in the butt to try and dodge roll everything, but if you make use of Elden Ring's new jump button, it's not too bad. And most of his attacks can be blocked by a shield, leaving him wide open to guard counters. It's a good way of showing that all options will be on the table and viable often, and that dodge rolling isn't always the answer. There's multiple ways to go about the fight, and there's multiple ways you should approach fights going forward. And in Godrick's case, all 3 work. It's just a shame that everyone seemed to freaking forget that whenever we got to Promised Consort Radahn. But this isn't about Radahn, this is about Godrick, and I'm happy to give him the golden medal, as he's what I consider to be the best second boss in video game history. For whatever it's worth, Godrick, you might not be the lord of all that is golden, but you are at least the gold medal winner here. And that's all I got for now. To be honest, once again, this idea was something stupid that I was going to make like a top 5 on, maybe as a joke to follow up my top 15 first bosses video. But then I kept thinking about more and more options and realized, oh crap, I can talk about a lot of games here. And it went from a top 10 to a top 15 to a top 20 because I just couldn't help myself. It was a lot of fun to make though. But that's all I got for now. If you enjoyed the video, consider liking and subscribing to see more videos of varying quality, and I'll see you all in the future. Take care.